Welcome to today's edition of the Human School's Mindshift Cards Conversations, a part of our learning journey here at the Human School. I'm Chad.
I'm Rachel.
And I'm Randy.
Each week, we will model brief inquiry conversations around one of our Mindshift cards in the Human School Mindshift Cards conversation. If you'd like to explore further questions, there are card sets available at thehuman.school. In this episode, our question comes from our inventor compass point. And the question is, in your current space, how much do you design alone? Why? How much do others around you tend to design alone? And why do you think this is? How does the system itself encourage our tendencies to work alone? So really the focus here is about designing in isolation. So I'd love to hear either of your thoughts on that.
So I'll start. I love this question, and I'll sort of look at it from two angles. One being my current space is this space. So being a retired school administrator now trying to work on a special project like the Human School, initially I worked alone in a silo, and it was really hard. It's really hard with your own ideas. And even if you share them occasionally with people and get a little bit of feedback, that's hard. But right now, when we have Chad and we have Rachel, and now we're starting to bring in other people to the conversation, the learning is just like exponential. And I'll also offer some thoughts. Being a school administrator and being a leader, and I think regardless of what your title is, I just think connecting with other people helps you develop your own learning and develop a vision, and to get people excited about doing this kind of work. This work cannot happen in a silo. And also some of those silos are like independent learning environments that just try to do things within. Like there's a lot of synergy within, but we also have to look outside of those particular learning environments. So I think this is a really interesting question that doesn't have some typically obvious answers, but I think there's a lot we could dig into here.
So I mostly don't like working alone. I do it a lot because of the nature of my role right now. There are a couple of hats that I wear that I'm sort of the only one that does. And I have momentary interactions in some of those roles with other people, although it's not in a collaboration. Oftentimes it's more in an FYI or tutorial sort of a way. And I really love the moments when I do get to collaborate with people. I really like what you said, Randy, about seeking it out and creating the spaces for that, and not just within our role. So our office is kind of like 6 people. And we all have, in some ways, some pretty like hard and fast lines to our roles. And so there's not always a lot of great overlap. But I think that was a good reminder for me in my head when I heard you say that. I was like, oh yeah, I should leave my office. I should go talk to people in the school about some of the work that I'm doing outside of some of the tasks that maybe aren't those people's favorite, but to try and find space and create space to collaborate with other people and make that happen for me. Because like you, it's really hard to do that work by yourself. And I'm probably an extrovert. I really feel energized interacting with other people, which is why I really love working with the two of you, and why I probably tell you way more about what I'm doing and bounce ideas off of you than even outside of this. But I think some of why that happens is the nature of our roles. You know, when we have really specific focus areas, that can do it. I also think, depending on the environment that you're in, if you're in an office or an environment that values the like one person, one path, like look how great I am, the competitive piece, I think that can really exacerbate that working alone piece as well, if it feels like not only is it an expectation, but also there's an advantage to it. I'm lucky that that competitive piece is not part of the work that I do. But I can imagine that does not lend itself to collaboration very well.
I'll say that, one of the things I always used to say in terms of collaboration is not a time and space, it's a mindset. And that, when we think about the second half of this question is, why people design alone. If we think about it from a classroom teacher's perspective, on one level, there is our building schedules structured to support that collaboration as a part of our professional day. And in the best environments, there's an attempt to try to make that happen. At the same time, where it can't happen for a variety of factors, I think the one question I would ask is, do people choose to design alone? And in an act of being really reflective and, kind of open about myself, I probably prefer to start the design process by myself and then expand out to get feedback on it. I will say that when I think about my personal preferences and comfortabilities, I'm not very comfortable, in the early design phase of something where I'm still generating ideas. Like, I want to wrap my head around what I think it can be and then expand out for people to poke holes and generate. But the limitation of that is that when you start from there, you may end up in a place that's ultimately not best for the organization. So, in terms of why or whether we design alone, I think it's really important. We oftentimes are pointing the fingers at the structures. And I would argue that we probably need to be much more reflective about that. So as classroom teachers, how often do I share my lesson planning? How often do I say, let's spend a half hour together before or after school talking about the way that we're going to approach this particular concept this week? I don't know that that's a mindset that everyone shares in that space. And that not only does it improve the quality of instruction, but it builds relationships. And so another Chadism, for lack of a better word, which is not really mine, is that when people talk about building relationships, they oftentimes focus on things like doing icebreakers or, fun little activities and get to know you. And my argument is, when you want to build relationships, you do deep work together. And I think that collaborating and sharing and authentically working and designing together is the right deep work, as opposed to kind of the false ways that schools and school systems tend to do it. So I don't know, just any other thoughts you guys have about why people choose to design alone or around that concept?
So one of my curiosities is around the idea of inviting the people who are going to be the users of the design into that process. So when you were saying about creating lesson plans, how many people are asking their students to work with them on creating a lesson plan? What do you want to learn today? What are you curious about? Yes, I bring that design expertise, but how do I collaborate with those other people? And I think that's a perfect example of, like you said, Chad, it's a mindset. And that's why it's one of our mind shifts.
Mm-hmm. I will say that, like, I'm working with a system in my job, and one of the pieces of stakeholder feedback, was around more choice in professional development. And it came from groups of teachers, and there wasn't a pushback, but there was a little bit of like we think we do a pretty good job. And the conversation was, well, to your point, Randy, are we getting the feedback from those who are the users around what that can look and feel like? So that's a great reminder that we're oftentimes disconnected from the people that we're designing for.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of my curiosities, and then Rachel, I'd love to hear one of yours, is, are there places in which, when we're thinking about our systems, whether at the classroom level or the school level or the district level, where we know, are people aware that they should be designing with others and choose not to? Or is it that the mindset right now is one in which, we stay in those silos? And so I think my curiosity is, the difference between kind of knowing that you're going to end up with a better product, but it might be more time, more energy, more resource heavy, versus taking the efficient path that the system kind of designed. So is there an awareness that we have that we're choosing efficiency over depth?
I also think one of the things that I'm thinking about in schools, in getting teachers who work in similar grade levels or content areas to work together, is the relationship is no different than trying to work with students. Is how do we invest the time and energy into developing teacher relationships in a way that they can feel comfortable and confident in one another? I think that things that I've heard over the years are feeling like they don't always trust their colleagues to do it as well as they perceive that they will, or things like feeling afraid of sharing their practice with their colleagues and fear of being judged for that. And I think a lot of that comes down to how familiar they are with one another's humanity and what their strengths are, and be able to see themselves in an asset-based way, as opposed to either someone to be afraid of because they're competing with them, or someone to be afraid of because they're judging them, or someone they feel like is not good enough to work with them. I think, how do we spend time building, and like you said before, Chad, deep, meaningful work? How do we create space to spend time building together to create that deep, meaningful work, and then build a foundation that allows for collaboration in a trusting way?
Well, and I think, to kind of wrap that up, this idea that there's a right way and a wrong way, there's my way and there's your way, there's only one way. Those are mindsets that we have to kind of break people of too, that, just because you do it one way doesn't mean that it's better or that I'm worse. It's that deficit versus asset-based thinking. So,
yeah. I have one more thing to add. I think
please.
that this is a question that, like many of our other questions, that we can slice and we can look at it through that lens of power again. And I think when we collaborate with other people, we create those conditions for them to exercise that power that's already within them. And that's what we want. We want that agency to be exercised. We want those voices from up and down the organization, regardless of what the title is. So I keep coming back to that word power through our conversations today and in our other conversations as well.
And I'll just add on to that. I know that when I'm with people who are very gracious with that collaborative spirit and removing that power dynamic from it, it's really kind of fun to be a part of that. When someone's like, look, I don't have a perfect example of this, so let's talk about what this can look like together. That invitation that happens, it unlocks something, I think, in people when they're used to being told what to do. So yeah, I love that reminder.
Good stuff.
So as you guys can see, these kinds of conversations, there's never a right answer. They're just great opportunities to discuss and share. And so all good inquiries lead to more curiosities. And we hope that as your mind begins to shift, you'll share your thoughts and ideas and your questions with us in our community at thehuman.school. Thank you so much for learning alongside us. And we hope that you'll also visit the Learning and Public Hub for additional resources and join our Facebook community committed to placing humanity at the center of all design. Thanks so much for chatting this week, guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.